And we're back in my basement dungeon gym, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of this miserable, rainy, windy, horrendous weather Monday here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Once again, a movie anniversary takes me by surprise. I like to think that I'm up on such matters as, well, when did my favorite movie from this year come out and that year, and all of this egghead stuff because of the savant brain. Go back to Wahlberg, Stay with Charlie Babbitt. I usually remember things like this, but somehow I did not know that 30 years ago today, on October 20th, 1995, a kind of second-tier favorite movie from the greatest decade Hollywood ever had, that would be your 1990s, Barry Sonnenfeld's fantastic adaptation of Elmore Leonard's runaway best-selling novel, Get Shorty, opened in theaters. Now, Get Shorty, when I say and when I use the phrase second-tier favorite, it's not that I'm not being literal, but favorite movies, it's really a very ethereal thing. There's no real way to quantify. It's just a matter of a feeling. So if I'm asked to name some movies from the 90s, which I put on the first tier, not in any order, we're talking Terminator 2, we're talking Clint Eastwood in The Line of Fire, and also Clint's Unforgiven, we're talking Pulp Fiction, we're talking Shawshank. Films like that I would consider to be on the top tier. James Cameron's Titanic also you could put up there if you want to. Curtis Hanson, LA Confidential. Those to me are top tier. For me, just me personally, top tier. Second tier, a movie like Heat, which I absolutely love, but I wouldn't put with those other movies. I wouldn't quite put with them. But another film from 1995, also released in fall. Heat was actually winter, December 15th. The fact that I remember the release date is, again, go back to Wahlberg, Stay with Charlie Babbitt. So I would remember the release date of Heat, but I didn't remember Get Shorty, October 20th. And my dear old dad, Alan Philip Cohen, who was 53 on October 20th, 1995. And again, he seemed really old to me. Okay, he's maybe a year and 8 months older than I am. Right here this morning, speaking to you out there. Time does a number on us all, and it plays tricks on us. My dad, his hair went gray when he was still in his late 30s. But objectively speaking, the 1995 version of Alan Philip Cohen wasn't old. He just had gray hair, and he had a great head of gray hair, I might add. But my father had read this book. He was not necessarily like, oh, Elmore Leonard was one of his guys. Like my father was a big reader. He was a big reader. He was a train commuter. Yes, he sometimes drove to clients, but whether it was, living in Massapequa where I grew up, and then later after my parents split, but stayed on very good terms. Always important to note, my parents did right by one another, and they did very, very right by their children. Broken home, but not in a conventional sense. But my dad, whether it was Massapequa, whether it was when he and I were in Woodbury or eventually Huntington, he was a train commuter. He only drove if there was literally no way to take the train. Because I would ask, oh, you're going to Circa today, are you driving? And he would always say, no, I'm not driving. Why would I drive when I could take the train? His default setting was, if at all possible, stay off the fucking roads. They're a little bit American Werewolf in London when they're giving the kids the advice. Stay off the moors. Stick to the road, stay off the moors. Stick to the train, stay off the fucking roads. You don't need to be sitting in traffic. And that's something that most of his partners, over time, they just didn't want to take the train because they needed the control of their car. And the irony of my father is he was also a control freak, but when it came to commuting, I'm taking a fucking train. You guys can sit in traffic all day. I don't care. Yeah, just go ahead, bill the clients while you're sitting in traffic. The early era cell phones or the car phones, they would be sitting in traffic and they could be billing clients. Hey, you know what? No problem. But my dad was an Elmore Leonard fan. He had read Rum Punch. He had read Get Shorty. And I guess, the internet existed, but there was no real advanced buzz on the movie. We were kind of going off in terms of why we both wanted to see it. And we planned, Dad was going to get home from work, and I had school that day, and we didn't see the movie in the city. I went home, he went home, and then we went to, the Broadway Mall had just opened. That's where we saw it. That's in Hicksville. But we were excited to see the movie because the preview looked fantastic. The preview had elements, and it had a kind of a Pulp Fiction feel, where you have comedic bits, and then you have sudden bursts of violence. Now, again, Pulp Fiction, top tier of the 90s. Get Shorty is not Pulp Fiction, but this is a fantastic film. It's one of those movies where I don't know anyone who has seen it and says, that film sucks. Whereas there are some people where Pulp Fiction just never works for them, or never has worked for them, and they feel like, what's the fuss? What's the big deal? I don't even understand. Travolta, spoiler alert, how is Travolta's character walking around? Didn't we just see him get killed? Forget it. So we saw it, and by the time we went to the movies that night, it was understood that this film had gotten phenomenal reviews. The New York papers all gave it either 3.5 or 4 stars. 2 thumbs up from Siskel and Ebert. David Denby, writing in New York Magazine, he loved it. You almost couldn't find negative reviews for this film. And the film still exceeded expectations. That is rare. When you are like really looking forward to seeing a film, and then it doesn't just hit expectations, but it exceeds expectations. And you ask yourself, well, what were we really thinking was going to happen? We thought we were going to see John Travolta looking cool, doing cool shit, doing alpha male stuff, well, although Dad wouldn't have spoken like that, but that he was going to be the guy. This is Travolta's movie. And it sort of cemented Travolta's really incredible comeback. It's like Travolta's had there were so many different times in history where his career took a downturn, but he always seemed to find his way back to the top. Like, he was a huge star, obviously, in the 70s. If we're being fair, he should have won the Best Actor Oscar for Saturday Night Fever. You know, again, I love Richard Dreyfuss, but, I mean, shouldn't Travolta have won that award? Wasn't that his year? Or was it, did he lose to Jon Voight for Coming Home? You know, I think it was 77, which was the year of The Goodbye Girl. But you understand what I'm saying. But Travolta's career dipped. It dipped in the early 80s. He made not a good movie with Olivia Newton-John, his co-star, of course, from Grease, Xanadu. And he did a lot of movies. Perfect with Jamie Lee Curtis it's a guilty pleasure, but they were trying to make a serious movie, not a movie that we were going to look at and say, my God, what were they thinking? This is practically X-rated, and you know what I'm talking about there. So his career dipped, and then he seemed to make a comeback in the late 80s with the Look Who's Talking movies, but those movies aren't good. They were, at least the first 2 were big box office hits. You know, Bruce Willis, the voice of Mikey, Kirstie Alley, George Segal, great cast. Those movies are not good. They're not good. And Travolta wasn't really asked to do anything, so his career was skidding, and he was making movies that were going straight to video. This was a guy who was in his 30s. He should have been still headlining not A-list, but he should have been headlining major studio films. He's doing straight-to-video movies like The Experts with Ari Gross. Not that I have anything, I liked Ari Gross. He was in a lot of movies in the 80s. He was a guy who looked like he was going to be a bigger star than he ended up being. Then he did a movie called Shout about like the early days of rock and roll. Nobody saw it. So he was working, but nobody really gave a shit. And it seemed that he was just going to continue to, he was always going to be able to work. You know, the name recognition would sell shit overseas. Sadly, we saw that with Bruce Willis towards the end of his movie career, where he kept working when he really shouldn't have been allowed to work, it doesn't seem, at least for the last year. But they were able to sell the projects to overseas market because you could put Bruce on the cover of the, promoting streaming or whatever it might be. But Quentin Tarantino, it doesn't seem like he took a risk in casting Travolta, but he didn't buy into the idea that, well, Travolta's box office poison or whatever was being said at this particular point in history. And the thing with Tarantino, and we know he could be a little controversial, saying, what's on his mind all the time, but he really does love movies. He is not a joke when it comes to that. He really did have an encyclopedic knowledge of movies when he worked at that video store. I think it was called Video Treasures, near LA back in the day. And then, of course, getting started with Reservoir Dogs and the career that he had. But by the time Tarantino was getting ready to cast Pulp Fiction, he knew that he wanted Travolta. He wanted John Travolta to play the lead. I mean, because there's another version of The Matrix where, maybe he figures out a way to get Michael Madsen to play. Like, you never know with Tarantino. He's capable of anything. And he is ingenious enough where he could have figured out a way, instead of having the character of Vincent Vega, he could have made it the same guy from Reservoir Dogs, and let's just get Michael Madsen back in here, because I feel like Michael Madsen was one of his guys. But just for reference, when Tarantino was preparing Kill Bill, he always intended Bill to be played by Warren Beatty. But then when he started to really think about it, when he had the script and Harvey Weinstein and everybody they were getting it together, he said, I don't think this movie that I wrote here, it's not exactly what I thought I was going to write. I don't think that Warren Beatty is right for this role. He ended up obviously not using Warren Beatty. And there was talk also, this I don't know for sure, that Tarantino had intended to cast Travolta in Reservoir Dogs, and that didn't happen. So he cast Travolta in Pulp Fiction. And I mean, if I'm asked, does Travolta give the best performance in the film? I don't think so. I think the answer to that question is Samuel L. Jackson. But Travolta came across like he knew he was meant to be a fucking movie star in Pulp Fiction. His body language, his eyes, the way he acts, the fact that he was a little chubbier, he didn't look like the kid from Saturday Night Fever with the abs and everything, and even Blowout, but he had the standing of a movie star in every one of his scenes in Pulp Fiction. The way that his line readings go from focused to lazy, it's all good, but you knew he wasn't winning Best Actor. It was going to be Tom Hanks again for Forrest Gump, a performance which certainly history has been very kind, not necessarily to the movie, but to Hanks' performance, which now to me seems touched by genius. And when I was a younger person, I kind of thought that Hanks' performance was overrated. I'm like, listen, he's great in Philadelphia, but what does he do in Pulp Fiction? He speaks with the same flat monotone the whole movie. Yeah, I was too harsh because for whatever reason, I am a Tom Hanks fan, but I didn't think that he should have won Best Actor, but now, you know what? The Oscars got that one right. I should have shut my mouth and not said anything. But what Travolta does in Get Shorty is that he takes a really good role and he doesn't just run with it. He seems to almost expand on this character. The character is more interesting as played by Travolta than I think he was on the page. This is the character of Chili Palmer. He is a character. He's a big personality. But in the original iterations of the screenplay, they had kind of toned down some of the character beats. And Travolta said, no, we got to put this back in. I'm not just going to go into a restaurant and say, hold on to my coat, or what happened to my coat. I'm going to explain the coat. That's the coat that Al Pacino wore in scene 6 in Scarface. Get my fucking coat. As opposed to, hey, where's my coat? The little beats Travolta knew they needed to keep. And the thing is, when you're adapting a book, you don't have unlimited time. And this is what people, not that they don't understand, you almost don't want to accept. In a 400-page novel, and you translate that to a 115-page screenplay, you're going to lose a lot of really good stuff. That's just the way that it goes. And Travolta kept as much of that great stuff from Elmore Leonard's novel as he could. And another little weird historical quirk that I don't understand and didn't get. So when the casting was announced, and he said, well, Danny DeVito is playing this big movie star named Martin Weir. And so then people said, okay, he must be the title. It must be referring to him. Get Shorty. And then there was a group that was saying, well, no. It refers to something else. No, it doesn't. That's the fucking title of the movie. The character of Chili Palmer, a mobster who somehow gets involved in the movie business because this guy owes him money and he has an idea for a movie and he meets that guy and the other guy. They want to get the Danny DeVito character to play the lead in this movie they're trying to put together called, what was it? I don't even remember the name of it, but Mr. Bojangles or something like that. Nothing. He's the guy. Get Shorty refers to the Danny DeVito character. Not Mr. Bojangles, Mr. Lovejoy. See, I get myself. I knew there was a J in there, Mr. Lovejoy. We never actually find out what that screenplay was about. We just know they want to get Shorty. And this movie kind of argues the script isn't really that important because anybody can do it. Well, I can tell you from experience, that's not true. That's really not true. It's not that anybody can't just do that, especially if you're talking about a book adaptation. Book adaptations are their own private horror. as Travolta's co-star, the late great two-time Oscar winner Gene Hackman, he could have told you, Gene Hackman was supposed to play Hannibal Lecter. I bet you didn't know that. You probably didn't know that. Gene Hackman wanted to play Hannibal Lecter, but you know what else Gene Hackman wanted to do? Because Gene Hackman was an author himself. He wanted to adapt Thomas Harris's novel, Silence of the Lambs. He wanted to be the guy to write the screenplay. And so Gene Hackman locked himself away at home for 6 weeks, sometime in 1990, and tried to knock out a first draft screenplay based on Thomas Harris's very dense, complicated novel, Silence of the Lambs. And after 6 weeks, Gene Hackman came in to the studio and said, fuck every one of you, this book can't be adapted, I'm out of the project. He didn't really say fuck you, but he was so mad and wrung out and unhappy that he couldn't do it. He didn't think anybody could do it. Ted Talley came on eventually, Hackman had exited the project, and history is happy that Anthony Hopkins ended up playing the role. No jokes, no judgment. But it's not that simple, and the Delroy Lindo character in Get Shorty seems to think that it is. But also, the movie gets into the idea that if you cast correctly, you may not need that great of a screenplay to succeed. And there is some truth to that. But usually, every great movie starts with a great script. The unfortunate thing is, you can make a terrible movie out of a great script, but it's really hard to make a great movie out of a terrible script. It's almost impossible. You would have to do like a Terrence Malick, where it's just gorgeous vista shots and no dialogue, and maybe you have a shot. Maybe, but most likely not. So the film proper of Get Shorty, we follow this character of Chili Palmer, and he's a mobster. He's like relatively high level in the Miami mob. And his capo doesn't get bumped off. He dies. The guy dies of natural causes. He was a little heavy, and he maybe probably smoked and drank and didn't take very good care of himself. He dies. And it's a pre-credit sequence. This film has just about the longest pre-credit sequence that I've ever witnessed. It's like almost 10 minutes before we actually get the credits. You know, the movie is like 14% over, or whatever the exact percentage is, before we even get the credits. So he goes to LA following a lead, somebody that owed the family money, and it's the David Paymer character. And David Paymer, if you don't know the name, he was an Oscar nominee, and many people thought he could have won for Billy Crystal's Mr. Saturday Night. You know, Billy Crystal, funny guy, local guy, my cousin Scott is friends with him. Billy Crystal was a little bit upset that his film, Mr. Saturday Night, didn't get more acclaim, and all of the acclaim for that film was centered on David Paymer, who plays Billy's brother in the film. I think they're both great. And I give Billy credit for playing a pretty unlikable protagonist in that movie. Buddy Young Jr., the character he plays, a fucking asshole. I guess he was supposed to be kind of a Don Rickles, but nastier, something like that. Or maybe, you know, a little Don Rickles and Henny Youngman, but just not a nice guy in the world of the film. But Travolta, and he follows this guy named Leo, and this is the David Paymer character, the actor I'm talking about, who owed the family money. And he kind of fled, went to Vegas, and won a shit ton of money. So now Travolta's not going after him. He's not there to rough him up. He's just there, hey, you don't have to account for anything other than the money you owe us. Don't worry about it. No one else is coming for you, you know, whatever. But Travolta's very good at his job. He has a commanding presence. The character of Chili Palmer has a commanding presence. And John Travolta, the actor, he didn't luck into his career. He's throwing out movie star power, charisma all over the place in this film, and he's doing it effortlessly. If I'm asked the question, what's your number one favorite John Travolta performance? It's this movie. This is the best performance he's ever given, and it is a total cinematic crime. He won the Golden Globe. He did not even get nominated for the Best Actor Oscar. Go fuck yourselves. I mean, yeah, Anthony Hopkins for Nixon was terrific, and I love Nicolas Cage. What a depressing movie, Leaving Las Vegas, Mike Figgis. John Travolta gave the best performance I saw by any actor in '95. Better than, you know, Big Al or Bobby D in Heat, as much as I love those guys, because they certainly had Oscar buzz. Pacino wasn't getting nominated, all that screaming and yelling. He did it once in Scent of a Woman. Hooah! She's got a great ass, and you got your head all the way up it. Let's say you do got me boxed, and I got to put you down, because I will not hesitate, not for a second, De Niro with the facial expressions that people kind of make fun of now. He was still doing it then. Now you got to be careful. When people start making fun of you, do something else. Like George Clooney, that thing where he used to look up at people and bob his head and act through his eyes. George, don't do that anymore. Stop doing it. Nobody likes to be the object of ridicule. But Travolta's character gets involved deep in the movie business. And there are people that don't care that he's mobbed up. They're not impressed by this guy's connected to the mob. Just don't fuck with him. They keep thinking they can. And it's not a good idea because Chili Palmer appears to have MMA level fighting skills. And he's really good with weapons. He's not somebody that you need to make an enemy of because his default setting, especially because he loves movies, he just wants to find out, hey, are you an actor? Are you a producer? Maybe I saw a movie. He's trying to get along because the people in the movie business, he doesn't have any particular issue with them except Gene Hackman's character of schlock producer Harry Zim. And we think that Harry Zim is dating the Rene Russo character of Karen Flores. She's like a scream queen. This would be like a Linnea Quigley. Sorry if you don't know who that is. But an actress who made a lot of horror movies. Linnea Quigley being, like, that's the first person I think of when you see this character of Karen Flores. But Harry Zim owes the family a little bit of money because of this connection with this, he didn't owe any money because of the Leo character. But the character, they start actually talking about making a movie. Travolta's Chili Palmer and Gene Hackman's Harry Zim. And the original idea, Mr. Lovejoy, starts to go into the background and they say, well, maybe we'll make a movie about this Shylock, that would be Travolta's character, trying to collect the debt, and this guy who ran up an enormous amount of money in Vegas. So stepping into this film is the future Tony Soprano. And the villain is, if you want to say that, this isn't a movie that has a conventional hero and villain structure until the very end, and then Delroy Lindo's character, he's a limousine company owner, and I don't think he's a limousine company. He makes a deal with, he's a limousine company owner, that's correct. And he had made a deal with Harry Zim to make this movie, this Mr. Lovejoy or whatever it is, or Mr. Loverboy. He doesn't even know the name of the movie that he wants to produce. He doesn't even give a shit, the Delroy Lindo character. He doesn't even care. Just make a fucking movie. We've given you a lot of money, Harry, et cetera, et cetera. So Travolta has his own deal with Hackman's character. And Travolta sets himself up as an antagonistic force to Delroy Lindo's character. Don't lean on my guy, Harry, or you're going to have to deal with me. And Delroy Lindo's character never quite gets just how dangerous Chili Palmer is, even though his bodyguard, played by James Gandolfini, more than 4 years before he was cast in The Sopranos, about 4 years before he was cast in The Sopranos. Gandolfini walks away with this movie. Other than Travolta, he's who you remember. And it's important to always point out just how brilliant James Gandolfini was. Not just Tony Soprano, but the movies in this decade where he gave supporting performances where there was not that much on the page, but he's the character who you remember. He did it in a movie with Geena Davis, which was supposed to be a big star vehicle for her called Angie. The film is not good. I love Geena Davis. Not good. James Gandolfini is sensational. True Romance, also from 1993. He basically plays a mob hitman kind of guy. He's the only character I remember other than Christian Slater's Clarence and Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman, man, what a crazy performance that was. But Gandolfini just had a certain magic. And in this movie, he plays the bodyguard for Delroy Lindo. You don't ever fuck with him. He's a champion weightlifter and presumably skilled fighter as well. But he's been in a number of movies that John Travolta's Chili Palmer has seen and say, wait a minute, I know you. And the two guys strike up one of the most unlikely friendships of any movie in that decade, for sure. But Gandolfini, especially knowing the career that he had after this, you see it. He's not like anyone else. He's taking this part, which is a fucking zero on the page, and he turns it into gold. Literally Rumpelstiltskin. He's turning straw into gold. So all of these threads of plot from the book, almost all of them, end up in the movie. And the film, despite the lightness of tone, You have one other character played by the leap year baby himself, Dennis Farina, a real mobster named Ray Bones, or Ray Barboni is his real name. And he keeps trying to one-up Chili Palmer, but Chili's just too smart for him. And the thing is, Chili Palmer, there's a little bit of the Charlie Partana, the Jack Nicholson character from the movie Prizzi's Honor, which has certain elements, although Travolta's not strictly speaking a hitman, whereas Charlie Partana, more or less is a mob. He's, as Vince Vaughn would say, he's a hitter. For sure, this guy's a hitter. He's not just a random guy working for the mob. This is a hitter. This is a hitter. Go to Vince Vaughn, hitter, 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 hitter in Mr. and Mrs. Smith. But the character that Nicholson plays in Prizzi's Honor, he speaks in such a way that people think he's stupid, and he's doing it deliberately. And part of it, of course, is the brilliance of Nicholson. But he's talking in such a way that you think this guy doesn't know which end is up. And Travolta's manner and presentation in certain scenes leads people to believe that he's not as on the ball as he actually is. And it's part of his character that he doesn't want to show all of his cards until he has to. And there's an incredible scene in a restaurant where Gene Hackman's character has been basically almost beaten to death by Dennis Farina's Ray Barboni because he made the mistake of fucking with this guy. The guy didn't come to his apartment to beat the shit. You start insulting somebody who is a made guy, a connected guy. What the hell do you expect to happen? So Gene Hackman is beaten up. He's sitting there. He can barely move. And Delroy Lindo and James Gandolfini mean to tell Chili Palmer, just go back to Miami. We don't need any problems. We don't need to put you in the hospital or possibly cripple you. Just go away. Don't go away mad. Just go away. But to everyone's surprise, not the audience, when James Gandolfini's bear makes a move on John Travolta's Chili Palmer, Chili takes about 3 seconds to dispatch him. And then the next time those guys meet is when they start to become friends. But we don't really know, are they friends? Or is James Gandolfini's bear just setting John Travolta up for a big finale, which is not going to go the way that he wants it to? So there's a lot of different elements working. And then there's this big thing where a bag of money is somewhere in a locker at LAX airport. And who's going to try and go get that money? It has a little bit of a Marathon Man angle. Is it safe? In that film, Laurence Olivier's Christian Zell, there's probably $10 million in 1976 worth of diamonds in a bank vault somewhere. But there are multiple people who might know where it is and when he's going to go get that money. And he needs to know, hey, if I show up at the bank, are there going to be 50 cops? Or is there going to be some lunatic graduate student with a gun to my head? So he's nervous, hence the phrase, is it safe? Well, Get Shorty has an, is it safe? All of these different characters are circling this money, which is a significant amount. But nobody wants to make a move on it because there might be 50 cops, 50 FBI, 50 DEA, alphabet soup. That money belongs to someone else. So the movie wraps up beautifully. And despite the graphic violence, despite the moments of really pretty shitty stuff and terrible behavior from certain characters, the movie has a sense of whimsy and a lightness of spirit that Pulp Fiction, despite the moments of humor, does not have. This is a Pulp Fiction light, but that is not a criticism. It's just a reality. This is not a great all-time film on the level of Pulp Fiction, but this is a 9.5 out of 10. If Pulp Fiction's a 10 out of 10, Get Shorty, this is that good. This is that good of a movie. And right now, I know that it's streaming on HBO Max, and it's on a couple of other streamers, but if you get Max, it's if you have the Hulu Disney package, it's streaming on those as well. I give this film my highest recommendation. It has such a sense of fun and tells a really great story. And the performances are all so colorful. DeVito is a scream as Martin Weir. He's a consummate bullshit artist, but that's the whole point. And Travolta gets one of the best lines of his entire career after he has this encounter with Gandolfini when he and with Delroy Lindo basically tries to, just get the fuck out of our way, go back to Miami. And he says, man, the movie business is rough. I got to go back to Loan Shark and take a rest. And he's only exaggerating by a little bit because, kind of an irony, the movie business might be even more cutthroat than the high-level mob. And if that isn't the way that people talk about Hollywood, the only town in the world where people will nice you to death, when people will shake your hand with one hand while burying a knife into your back with the other. But hey, that's baseball, Susan, and that's, at least in the world of this film, that's how the movie business works and does not work. So Get Shorty was a box office hit. It made $115 million against a production and marketing budget somewhere in the range of $30 million. So the budget was maybe a little lower than you would have expected, but there's some special effects, but there's no large scale, CGI or anything. That's presumably how they were able to keep the budget in a reasonable range. So it was a box office hit, but in certain quarters, people were a little bit disappointed because the film got better reviews than anyone was expecting. This movie is 90+% on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, it should have been nominated for all of the Oscars, and it just wasn't. I guess because it was in the same ballpark as Pulp Fiction. But it was a hit, $115 million total gross. It made like 70-something in the States, and then it did pretty well overseas. I think the studios were a little bit disappointed. They thought that it was going to make more in the United States than it actually did. But I mean, it doesn't make any difference now that it should have grossed 5 times its production cost and it grossed just under 4. But this is one of those movies. This is one of those movies you can always pop in if you're feeling depressed and just marvel at the command of the screen that John Travolta shows. I guess he was 40 when this film was in production. He is marvelous. And the entire cast, whether it's Delroy, whether it's the future Tony Soprano, or Gene Hackman, who usually didn't play goofball roles like he plays in this film. Rene Russo is a riot. DeVito is great. Everybody brings their A game, and it is just a sparkling entertainment. Get Shorty, released on this day, 1995, a second-tier favorite, and really one of the best movies, certainly one of the most entertaining films of the greatest decade Hollywood ever had. This has been episode 631 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Monday morning here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.